tablet of order and chaos. Selling you on the black market is gonna make me a mint.
Good, you can use a mint. Ugh, I can smell your breath from here.
Spider-Man?
Wait, how would you eat a mint through that fishbowl?
Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions is the first true multiverse Spider-Man game that we received, and I was a bit concerned about how the gameplay would be considering you play as 4 different Spider-Men, but it actually turned out pretty well. The story for this title is very simple and easy to understand. Pretty much, Mysterio breaks into a museum and breaks a magical tablet which has its pieces scattered across dimensions, and it's up to the Spider-Man in each dimension to recover every piece in their world. The simplicity of the story reminds you of Spider-Man Friend or Foe, as once you know you have to go through each dimension and obtain each fragment, you just rinse and repeat the same loop over and over until you get to the final boss. Once you get a fragment, you don't hold on to it until you collect them all, you always return to Madam Web, who then adds that piece to the others until you return with more. Madam Web being your guide throughout the story was a nice change up from the normal narrators and mission objective screens that were present in the older games. She didn't tell you exactly what to do, but she pushes you in the right direction so you don't get stuck in the same area for too long. As you probably already know, you play as Amazing Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, Noir Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 2099, with each hero having multiple fragments in their specific dimension. Because the fragments are scattered, it's not as simple as going to each dimension and looking around giant areas until you find the piece. In each dimension, one of the fragments is found by a villain who you must defeat in order to obtain the piece. To make matters worse, they actually use the fragment to their advantage, creating the worst possible scenario in regards to actually obtaining the piece. The story makes it clear from the beginning that each piece of the tablet gives its users enhanced powers, making them stronger and faster than they were before, thus making them harder to defeat. With the villains using this to their advantage, they cause untold destruction across a plethora of areas to make things very difficult for that dimension's Spider-Man. Because getting to the final fight is such a chore, receiving each piece of the stone felt rewarding and made it feel like you really earned it. What's great is that having a story that is built up by collecting one thing after the next makes it easy to get excited for the culmination of everything once each piece is collected. Personally, I think the ending is right what it should be. After collecting all the pieces, it puts the story to bed without it being too complicated. Overall, this story is easy to understand and does a great job at dividing up the plot between all 4 Spider-Man. Because you switch between each of them for each level, none of them overstay their welcome. Except for maybe Noir. He kinda sucks, but I'll get to that soon. For a first attempt at a multiversal game, I think Beanox did a solid job at the story. The meat and potatoes of the game revolves around the gameplay. As I mentioned earlier, the gameplay loop is similar to older titles, with you switching Spider-Man as you move from level to level, but let's take a minute to discuss the levels themselves. First off, each level started off with the villain right in the beginning, so you knew exactly what you were going to face when going through the level. The levels themselves were similar, but varied based on the Spider-Man that you were playing as. All 4 Spider-Man had levels based on their own dimensions, with them facing dimension-specific versions of iconic villains we've seen before. Many times, these levels consisted of large open spaces that required you to complete some sort of objective to move forward. This could be defeating all the enemies, smashing televisions, disabling generators, or something else entirely. Regardless, you always had to do something simple in order to unlock the next area or cutscene within the mission. What was cool was how the enemies were designed around what villain was in that level. In the last mission for Ultimate Spider-Man, the villain in that world is Carnage, and because of its abilities, it affected the soldiers, causing them to mutate. So in moving around the level, the small enemies you would constantly encounter were these mutated soldiers. This is just one example, but when you go through the other levels and face these unique enemies, it helps add to the overall world and make everything just flow seamlessly. The traversing in this game is surprisingly good, as you don't walk in a straight line from area to area, but instead you're web zipping up and down buildings and services, all while chasing the villain. What's even better is that the environments always change as you move on to the next level, so even though you're returning to the same world, you're never in the same area more than once. The web swinging wasn't the best as it felt slow and stiff, but it works well enough to get you from place to place. Same thing goes for the wall crawling, as it takes a second to attach to the walls, and when you do attach, you don't crawl up them very fast. To be honest, as a whole, the movement in this game is very static and could have used a tune-up as it just felt a lot slower than it did in the past games. A unique mechanic new to this title was the first-person camera shots. As you face these villains, many times the camera will cut from third person to first person and then prompt you to start attacking your enemy. This is a nice change from the typical QuickTime events that have been present for years and makes it feel like you're the one beating that villain to a pulp. But of course, the villains can attack you too, so you can't just punch away, as you have to pay attention and look out for the prompts so you can be sure to dodge on time or else you'll take some damage. These first-person camera shots also appear when you're collecting the fragments, just adding to the overall satisfaction as it makes it seem like you're holding the piece in your own hand instead of just looking through the screen. The villains themselves were all unique and given a design that was well needed. Because these villains were in different dimensions, they aligned with the overall world of that dimension, making them even more different than their counterparts. For example, just look at Vulture and Hobgoblin. If you compare their designs to what they look like in the comics, they are completely different and look how you would think they would based on the world they reside in. Vulture is a lot creepier and menacing than normal and leans into the horror aspect, as he seems like a creature you would find inside a haunted house instead of the flying bird we're accustomed to. While Hobgoblin looks like a goblin that received some tech upgrades, making him faster and more deadly than ever before. Having him inside the Spider-Man 2099 dimension made perfect sense, as he presented a decent challenge and helped elevate the gameplay a lot. Unfortunately, the Noir Spider-Man sections needed a lot more time in the oven. In each of these levels, all you do is stealth attack a whole bunch of enemies and grab civilians while trying to stay out of the light. On the surface, this doesn't seem annoying, but doing this for multiple levels gets old real fast. To make matters worse, if you do get spotted, trying to fight the enemies is a lost cause. Attacking them after being revealed just ends with you performing a bunch of combos, with the enemies blocking each one until you get frustrated and then retreat back to the darkness. Because you're forced into this repetitive gameplay loop, these Noir sections just become a pain and make you want to get through them fast so you can play with the other heroes. This is a shame because Noir is a cool variant, but his sections are so poor that they stand out as the worst part in the game by far. When it comes to the actual combat, it's toned down some from past games, but still has enough there to give you some flexibility during the gameplay. For each Spider-Man, there are combat upgrades that you can unlock that give certain abilities to each hero depending on the situation. To unlock the combat upgrades, you have to complete in-game challenges that would unlock these spider points that served as the currency for unlocking the upgrades. The more challenges you completed, the more currency you would have. You could check what challenges you completed or not completed in each level by going to the Web of Destiny, where it had all the challenges laid out in each level. What's nice is that you don't have to unlock the same skill for each Spider-Man, as you can pick and choose which hero you want to have which ability, instead of them all having the same skills no matter what. You could take it a step further and choose not to upgrade the combat moves for a Spider-Man at all, and make them completely bare bones in terms of combat moves, making the game even harder. After purchasing these moves, you would be able to perform different combos by pressing different combinations of square and triangle, creating new abilities that would cause decent damage to enemies. These abilities weren't anything over the top, but they were enough to help in diversifying the combat. Speaking of spicing up the combat, Ultimate Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2099 had special abilities unique to them and only them. Ultimate Spider-Man had a mode called Rage Mode, where you would gain enhanced strength for a period of time, making it easy to wipe out gangs of enemies in no time at all. This whole Rage Mode made a lot of sense, since, you're in the symbiote suit. When playing as Spider-Man 2099, you had the ability to slow down time, allowing you to move behind enemies and dash through long areas. In my opinion, this was by far the best power, as slowing down time made everything so much easier, especially when surrounded by large groups of enemies. These moves weren't overpowered either, as there are bars underneath your health bars that serve as meters that would run out when using the ability and fill up after defeating the enemies. The boss fights are designed a bit differently than past games, as you fight many of the bosses more than once, fighting them both before and after they gain a hold of a fragment. These fights aren't too hard, but they do require you to pay attention, because they often demand you to perform some sort of move to lower their guard and leave them open for attack. Like in the Vulture fight, you have to lure Vulture up to the areas that have spotlights, and then once it's in line with the light, flip it up to stun him and inflict some damage. Instances like these are a nice addition to the gameplay because they force you to think a bit instead of just attacking away, and don't require QTEs to perform each guard breaking move. Now, it wouldn't be a Spider-Man game if there wasn't additional secrets that you can unlock after completing the story. In the game menu, there are various tabs that you can pick from, with extras varying from alternate costumes, concept art, figurines, and movies. If there was a reason to replay levels, it would be to run through some of them while wearing the alternate suits. Not only are there more suits, each Spider-Man has additional suits that are variants of their original suits, making it even more enticing to throw them on and fight through some levels. In the end, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions took a lot from previous Spider-Man games and meshed it all together to make a unique multiversal Spider-Man experience that is worth at least one playthrough. For those reasons, I'm going to give this game an 8. If the noir sections were developed better and the movement was more fluid, this game could have been so much better. Regardless, if you're a Spider-Man fan, then you should give this game a shot, purely because you can play as Spider-Man 2099 before you add in everything else. What did you think about Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions? Where would you rank this among your favorite Spider-Man games? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like or subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
So, what'd I miss?
What the?
Nuff said, kids. Nuff said.